I knew something was wrong the moment I saw her mailbox. The metal door hung open just enough for me to spot the corner of an envelope I had written weeks ago. Then another, and another. A whole stack of my letters sat inside, untouched, edges curling from the cold air. My name was still on every front corner in the same slow handwriting I've used since arthritis stiffened my fingers. She hadn't even bothered to tear one open. Her voice echoed in my mind as I stood there. "Stop writing me, Dad. I mean it. Stop." She said it so sharply that day, like the words were knives she had been waiting to use. At the time, I told myself she was stressed or upset, but looking at those unopened letters now, all neatly ignored, I felt something deeper pressing against my ribs. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a bad week. This was a wall she had built, brick by brick, while I kept trying to reach through it. I looked around the small apartment complex, hoping no one was watching me stare into my own daughter's mailbox like a confused old man. I'm 76. I should be used to being overlooked by now. But nothing prepares you for being dismissed by your own child. My hands shook as I closed the mailbox door. It was the way she said it last time that haunts me. She didn't ask me to stop. She ordered it, as if my love was something she needed to shut down before someone else saw it. I keep replaying the moment she turned away after saying those words. The way her shoulders tightened, the way she refused to look back. That wasn't anger. That was fear. The kind that comes from something, or someone, standing behind her. The more I think about it, the more I believe she wasn't speaking for herself. My daughter has a stubborn streak, yes, but she was never cruel. Not like this. Age has made me slow, but not blind. I've seen how people can influence others, especially when they sense weakness or gain something from it. She has a partner now, someone I barely know. There's a supervisor at her job who always acted too familiar. There's debt she never talks about. I don't know where the pressure is coming from, but pressure leaves marks, and I'm starting to see them. Standing there, I felt something cold settle in my chest, not because she ignored my letters, but because she left them in the mailbox as if she wanted someone else to see how little I mattered. It was a message without ink, a silent rejection, and that silence cut deeper than anything she could have written back. I walked back to my car with my cane tapping against the pavement. Each step felt heavier, as if I was carrying the truth with me. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think my daughter could shut me out so completely. But when the person you raised treats your words like trash, you can't pretend you're imagining it. What scares me most is not her silence. It's the feeling that I'm losing her to something I can't see, something that wants me gone, something that makes her ashamed of the man who wrote every one of those letters, hoping she'd remember he still cares. If you saw your child reject every attempt you made to reach them, what would you think? Would you walk away? Or would you keep trying, even when it hurts? I kept a copy of every letter I ever sent her, not because I expected praise or some grand reply, but because writing helped me feel like I still had a place in her life. Most of them were simple updates. How my blood pressure was doing, how the garden was finally producing tomatoes again, how the house felt too quiet without her visits. I wrote about things she used to care about. I wrote because I thought she'd want to know her father was still here, still trying. The first few letters were warm, the way I always hoped our conversations would be. I told her I missed our Sunday breakfasts. I told her I was proud of her new job, even though she never shared much about it. I asked about her health, her sleep, her stress. Nothing dramatic, just a father reaching out with the only kindness he had left to offer. And she didn't open a single one. As I reread my copies now, I see pieces of our past scattered through each page. Small memories I thought would remind her that we used to be close. There was one line about the time she fell off her bike at the park and cried until I carried her home. Another about her school choir performance, when she scanned the audience until she found me waving. Back then, she looked at me with trust. That memory still sits heavy in my chest because I don't know when that trust faded or why I didn't notice it slipping away. When she turned 15, something shifted. She started closing her bedroom door more. She began giving shorter answers, as if speaking to me cost her something she didn't want to give. I blamed it on teenage years, friends, independence. I told myself distance was normal, but small signs kept appearing, missed dinners, forgotten promises, that look in her eyes when I tried too hard. A look that said she wasn't angry, just unreachable. In one of the letters she never opened, I tried to talk about the decisions I made when she was younger. how I took extra shifts at the warehouse so she could join her school trips, how I refused promotions that required travel because she needed someone home after her mother passed. I didn't list these things for sympathy. I wrote them because I wanted her to understand that every choice had a cost, and I paid it willingly. I thought explaining my side might soften her heart. Now it feels like I was speaking into a locked room with no light. As years went by, we drifted in ways that didn't make sense. Misunderstandings grew without being spoken. Sometimes I tried to bridge the gap with a phone call, but she was always too busy. Other times, she sounded distant, like she had to defend herself from something I hadn't even said. I didn't know what she believed I had done wrong. I still don't. Looking back, I see the seeds of betrayal forming long before the mailbox filled. Not malicious betrayal, something quieter, shaped by silence and assumptions. Maybe she carried stories in her mind about me that were never true. Maybe she thought my sacrifices were choices I made for myself, not for her. Maybe someone else whispered ideas about my failures until she believed them. The hardest part is knowing she never read the words that could have corrected those beliefs. She never saw the truth I tried to offer her gently. She never let my voice inside long enough to understand who I really was, or what I gave up without asking anything in return. And sometimes I wonder, do children truly understand what their parents hold back for their sake? The first time she didn't answer my call, I assumed she was busy. The second time, I thought maybe her phone had died. By the fifth missed call in a row, with no reply to the short voicemail I left, something inside me tightened. It wasn't anger. It was the kind of quiet fear only a parent knows. The fear that something is wrong, and you're the last person allowed to know it. Soon she stopped visiting altogether. No quick weekend drop-ins, no shared meals, no updates about her life. I tried writing shorter notes, thinking maybe the letters felt overwhelming. I slipped them under her door when I walked by her building. They stayed exactly where I placed them, unread and untouched, until the wind carried them away or someone swept them into a bin. The silence she built around herself wasn't accidental. It was a wall I couldn't climb. As the weeks went on, I kept going back in my mind to small moments I had dismissed years ago, tiny sparks of resentment I never understood. I remembered the time she asked why I never traveled like other dads, and I told her I couldn't afford to leave her alone after her mother passed. She looked disappointed, though she tried to hide it. Or the day she accused me of being too strict about her curfew, not knowing I stayed awake every night just to make sure she made it home safe. Back then, I thought these were ordinary parent-child frictions. Now I wonder if she saw them as something harsher, something unfair. Our first real conflict happened when I chose to keep our house instead of moving somewhere cheaper. She was 18, full of ideas about what our lives should look like. I explained that the house held the last memories of her mother, and that stability mattered more than downsizing. She argued that I cared more about walls than her future. I didn't know how to explain that I had already given up raises, promotions, and entire chapters of my own life to make sure she never fell through the cracks. I thought I did what was right, but I could see she didn't believe that. Those memories circle in my mind now, not as excuses, but as clues. Every time she withdrew, I tried to tell myself she needed space. Every unanswered message, every ignored visit, I rationalized as part of adulthood. But the silence lasted too long, and the way she avoided my eyes when we did cross paths, it felt like she was afraid of something, not just distant. Inside me, two voices fought constantly. One whispered guilt, telling me I should have seen her pain earlier. The other insisted I had acted out of responsibility, not selfishness. I tried to balance those truths, but the weight grew heavier each day. It's a painful thing when your own child rewrites your intentions into something darker than they were. The moment that changed everything came when I overheard someone at her workplace mention she'd been under a lot of influence lately. They didn't name anyone, but their tone told me enough. Influence, pressure, someone reinforcing the distance she'd started putting between us. Someone feeding her a version of me twisted enough to justify cutting me off. That thought chilled me, because silence alone hurts, but silence guided by another hand feels like a trap. Not for me, but for her. And I realized, with a sinking dread, that she might not be pushing me out entirely by choice. I keep asking myself what any parent would wonder in this situation. What would you do if your child seemed to erase you from their life? The message came on a Tuesday morning, tucked between a utility bill and an advertisement I didn't want. At first, I thought it was another form letter asking for donations. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar, but something about the weight of it, light, careful, made me pause before opening it. When I slid the paper out, the first line froze me in place. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I believe your daughter is in more pain than she lets anyone see. I read it twice, slowly, as if the words might shift into something less alarming. The idea that a stranger knew anything about my daughter's inner world felt unsettling, almost intrusive. But as I moved through the paragraphs, unease shifted into something sharper, validation, and then heartbreak. The writer didn't sign a full name, only initials. They said they had worked near her for a few months, enough to notice patterns others ignored. They described her arriving early and leaving late, always tense, always checking her phone like she expected bad news. They mentioned how she stayed quiet in meetings, even when spoken to, and how she seemed to carry something heavy she didn't feel safe sharing. Then came the line that cut through me. She often stepped outside to cry, but she would wipe her face quickly whenever someone walked by. My daughter, who used to burst into tears on my shoulder without shame, crying alone in parking lots and stairwells, the thought shook me. It didn't match the distant, hardened version of herself she showed me. It didn't match the voice that once laughed so freely in our kitchen. It didn't match the woman who told me to stop writing. The letter went on to describe a pattern I had sensed, but never confirmed. Secrecy. She kept her struggles hidden, but her fear was visible if you looked closely. The stranger said she often whispered on the phone, voice trembling, as if she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. She stopped talking about her home life altogether, brushing aside questions with a tight smile. Reading those lines, I felt both validated and devastated. I wasn't imagining. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Her silence hadn't come out of nowhere. Near the middle of the letter, the writer described when they first noticed her change. It had been almost a year earlier, around the same time my calls began going unanswered, around the time she stopped visiting, around the time those unopened letters first started piling in her mailbox. That timeline sat heavy on my chest. It meant her withdrawal wasn't a sudden choice. It was a slow pulling away, pushed by fear, shaped by pressure I still couldn't identify. The final paragraphs hinted at what I had dreaded. She speaks about you less than she used to, but when she does, there's a mix of love and confusion. It sounds like someone has convinced her to doubt the intentions she grew up trusting. Someone, always that shadow behind her silence, always that unseen hand twisting her perception of me. I didn't know who it was. A partner? A coworker? A friend who didn't understand our history? But the letter made one thing clear. The distance between us wasn't built on truth alone. When I finished reading, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the paper. Validation warmed me for a moment. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't imagining the change. But sorrow followed quickly, swallowing the relief just as fast. My daughter was hurting, and she was shutting me out because someone had convinced her I was the wrong person to trust. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer I rarely open. I didn't throw it away. I needed proof that my instincts weren't misguided. And I keep wondering, would you trust a stranger who knew more about your child's pain than you did? I didn't sleep the night after reading the stranger's letter. I sat in my living room with the lamp on low, replaying every line until the words felt carved into me. I had believed the distance was personal. Her choice, her anger, her decision to walk away. But now I understood there were pieces of her life I had never been allowed to see. Pieces someone else had taken hold of. The next message arrived 3 days later, from the same initials. Shorter this time, but heavier. It began with a sentence that made my breath catch. She's carrying more than she can manage, and she's breaking under it. The writer explained what I had suspected but never confirmed. She was drowning in financial strain. Her partner, someone I had only met once, was controlling their expenses, leaving her responsible for rent, bills, and debts she didn't create. She had taken extra shifts at work, not because she wanted to move up, but because she was terrified of falling behind. Every paycheck disappeared the moment it arrived. Then came the part that twisted my stomach. She mentioned once that she never felt free to make her own choices growing up, but when she said it, she sounded unsure, like the thought wasn't hers originally. I sat back in my chair, feeling the familiar ache of old sacrifices pressing against the inside of my chest. I remembered the choices I made when she was young, the long hours, the skipped meals, the dreams I folded up and tucked away so she could chase her own. But somewhere along the way, those choices had turned into wounds, not because they harmed her, but because she never understood them, and I never explained. Misunderstandings can rot slowly, the way wood softens underwater long before it breaks. And now I could see it clearly. Our silence had become the space where resentment grew. The letter went on to describe her workplace. Tense, competitive, a supervisor who singled her out for tasks no one else wanted. She didn't complain. She just tightened her jaw, kept her head down, and carried more than she should. She was always afraid of losing her job, afraid of disappointing someone at home, afraid of failing at everything at once. And there was her partner, controlling her money, controlling her time, whispering doubts into her ear. "You owe him nothing," I whispered into the empty room. But I wasn't the one she was listening to. The message ended with a line that landed like a heavy stone on my chest. "She talks about you with conflict. She wants to reach out, but she says she doesn't know how to face the past. She feels pulled between love and resentment." Trapped. That was the word that echoed through my mind. My daughter was trapped, not just by a toxic partner, not just by financial pressure, but by the stories she had been told about her own childhood. Stories that pressed against memories she no longer trusted. I rubbed my face with both hands and tried to steady my breathing. Anger burned inside me. Anger at her partner for twisting her life. Anger at the supervisor who wore her down. Anger at myself for letting silence stretch so far between us that someone else filled it with lies. But beneath the anger was something quieter, heavier. Grief. Grief for the years we spent talking around the truth instead of through it. Grief for the sacrifices she never saw. Grief for the pain she carried alone. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell her everything she misunderstood. But I also knew that chasing her with explanations would only push her further away. She wasn't rejecting me out of hatred. She was drowning, and she thought I was part of the tide pulling her under. So I sat there, torn between reaching for her and respecting the wall she had built. And I wondered, would you confront your child or try to understand the pressures she carries first? I suggested we meet somewhere neutral, somewhere quiet, somewhere without memories pressing in from every corner. A mediator at the community center offered us a small room for an hour. I arrived early, hands folded on my cane, heart tapping unevenly against my ribs. I didn't come to accuse her. I came because I still believed a single, honest conversation could steady the ground between us. When she walked in, she kept her arms crossed, shoulders tense. She didn't hug me. She didn't even nod. She just sat down across from me, eyes fixed on a spot somewhere near my feet. I could tell she didn't want to be there, but she came anyway. That small choice gave me a little hope. The mediator opened with something simple. "Why are you both here today?" She looked at her hands. I looked at my daughter. She didn't speak, so I did. "I'm here because I miss you," I said quietly, "and because I want you to know the truth about the things I did when you were young. The choices I made weren't to control you. They were to protect you." She shifted, but she didn't look up. I told her about the late nights I worked to keep the lights on, how I sold my tools to cover medical bills, how I turned down a promotion because the travel would have left her alone too much. These weren't stories meant to make her feel guilty. They were pieces of a picture she'd never been allowed to see. But the moment the words left my mouth, I saw her breathing change. Her chest tightened, her jaw locked. Something inside her recoiled. "You always do this," she whispered. "You bring up everything you sacrificed. Makes me feel like I owe you something I can't give." Her voice cracked, then steadied into something sharp. I didn't ask for those choices. The mediator tried to soften the moment, but the temperature in the room had already shifted. I felt the air thicken with the same tension that had grown between us for years. I swallowed hard, trying not to let her words cut deeper than they already had. "I'm not asking you to owe me anything," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I just want you to understand why I did what I did." She finally met my eyes, and the pain in hers startled me. It wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. "You don't get it," she said. "Everything feels like pressure. Work, bills, him telling me I can't trust you, people reminding me of things I can't change. And now you're asking me to face memories I don't even know how to think about." Her words spilled out faster than she seemed prepared for. She rubbed her temples like she was trying to push back something heavy. I took a breath, wanting to comfort her, But the moment I leaned forward, she flinched, not physically, but emotionally, as if my concern was another burden she couldn't carry. "I'm trying," I told her. "I'm trying to give you the space you need, but I'm also trying to stand up for who I am. I can't keep pretending I was a bad father just to make your life easier." She let out a quiet, broken sound. Not quite a sob, not quite a sigh. "I can't do this," she said. "Not today." She stood up before anyone could respond. The mediator called her name softly, but she was already halfway to the door. She didn't look back. She didn't wait for me. The door closed behind her with a softness that hurt more than any slam. I sat there, hands trembling, realizing something I didn't want to admit. Sometimes love can't fix a wound that someone else keeps reopening. And maybe, just maybe, protecting my own dignity wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was the only self-respect I had left. Is protecting your own dignity betrayal, or necessary self-respect? The message arrived late in the evening, long after I had convinced myself she wouldn't reach out again. My phone buzzed once, then went silent. Her name appeared on the screen, familiar and painful all at once. For a moment I just stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid of what she might say, afraid of what she wouldn't. When I finally tapped the notification, her voice poured out through a recorded message, shaky, slow, like she was forcing herself to say words she'd avoided for years. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to talk to you." She paused, breathing uneven. "I wasn't angry at you. I was angry at everything else, and you were the closest place to put it." I sat there, my fingers tightening around the phone, listening without moving. She continued in a voice that kept breaking and rebuilding itself. "I thought you were controlling when I was young, that every decision you made was about limiting me. That's what I was told." There it was, the influence I had feared. A partner, a supervisor, someone whispering behind the scenes, someone who found it useful to redraw her childhood until she doubted every good thing she had ever known. She hesitated again, as if bracing herself. "He kept saying you held me back, that you wanted me dependent on you, that you were the reason I never felt confident." My jaw tightened. Not at her, never at her, but at the realization that her betrayal hadn't grown in the dark alone. Someone else had fed it. Someone who benefited from pulling her away from me. Someone who turned my sacrifices into accusations she didn't know how to question. She took another shaky breath, and I believed it because parts of it felt true, at least the way I remembered things. I remembered you working so much. I remembered you saying no to things. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand how hard you were trying. Her voice cracked again. "I'm ashamed of how much I let myself twist things. I felt guilty every time I thought about reaching out. I didn't know how to face you, not after everything I said." That was the moment something inside me gave way. Not forgiveness, not healing, just acknowledgement. A painful, heavy recognition that her distance wasn't born from hatred, but from fear and confusion, planted by others and watered by silence. "I didn't shut you out because I didn't love you," she whispered. "I shut you out because I didn't know how to admit I was wrong." Her confession washed over me like cold water. It didn't erase the hurt, it didn't close the distance, but it did something deeper. It revealed the truth of what had broken between us. Not malice, not cruelty, not deliberate betrayal, but perception. Perception shaped by exhaustion, manipulation, and years of unspoken pain. She had been fighting battles I didn't see, and I had been clinging to a version of her that no longer matched the one trembling in that recording. The climax of her message came in one final, cracked sentence. "I don't know how to fix everything I broke, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know why I ran." I closed my eyes. A mixture of anger and sorrow tightened my chest. Anger at the voices that twisted her memories, and sorrow at how deeply she believed them. But beneath that blend was something quieter, something heavier, understanding. I couldn't undo the pressures that shaped her judgment. I couldn't rewrite the stories she had been fed, and I couldn't control how she saw me, even if everything I did was for her. Love has limits, even when it feels endless. And now I was left to ask myself, and you, what consequence is fair when someone hurts you out of fear, not hatred? I visited her apartment building again a week after receiving her message. Not to confront her, not to demand anything. I went because I needed to understand something that had been gnawing at me since the day I first saw her overflowing mailbox. I stood there for a long time, looking at the small metal door that held every word I had written. Pages of love, fear, memory, apology, and hope, all sealed away where she still hadn't touched them. I didn't open the box. I didn't try to see how many envelopes lay inside now. It didn't matter. The letters had become something else entirely. They weren't just attempts to reach her anymore. They were a record of everything I felt while losing her piece by piece. Each one carried a version of me she may never read. The father who tried, the man who struggled, the elder who still believed his words mattered. Her message had shaken me, but in a different way than I expected. Knowing she hadn't turned away out of hatred settled the sharpest part of my pain, but it also left a quieter ache behind. A kind that comes when you see how easily love can bend under the weight of pressure and misunderstanding. I kept thinking about what she said, that she didn't know how to admit she was wrong, that guilt held her at a distance, even when her heart wanted to come closer. I leaned on my cane and breathed slowly. I couldn't fix the story she carried in her mind. I couldn't erase the influence of people who twisted her understanding, and I couldn't force her to open the letters that still waited for her. All I could do was decide what to do next, with my dignity, my heart, and the years I have left. I thought about the conversations we never had, the times I stayed silent to keep her from worrying, the moments when I thought I was protecting her, but ended up creating shadows she filled with her own fears. Sacrifice without explanation can look like control. Distance can grow in places where honesty should have lived. I know that now, even if I learned it too late. Still, the blame doesn't rest on one person alone. Her choices cut me deeply. Even if they came from confusion, my choices left gaps she didn't know how to fill. We are both shaped by what we didn't say and what we couldn't understand. That truth hurts, but it also steadies me. It tells me this story is bigger than blame. It's about the limits of love when life pushes two people apart faster than they know how to hold on. I rested my hand against the cool metal of her mailbox. Inside were months of my thoughts, words she may never claim. And for the first time, I accepted that maybe they weren't for her anymore. Maybe they were for me. Proof that I kept reaching even when my hands were shaking. Proof that I didn't let silence win without trying to break it. Proof that love, even unanswered, still has weight. I don't know if she'll come back. I don't know if I should wait. I don't know if another letter would help or only make her retreat again. What I do know is this. I will not beg for space in the life of someone who fears my presence, and I will not erase myself to earn affection I already gave freely. The letters will stay where they are for now, quiet, patient, honest. If she ever wants to read them, they'll be waiting. If she doesn't, they'll remain a testament to a father who tried when everything else broke. So I ask you, would you keep writing, or would you let the mailbox close for good?